On the surface, the mechanism appears flawless. The monumental arenas are cleared, the legendary grass fields are meticulously manicured, and the iconic gold trophy has been polished to a blinding gleam. Flight itineraries for elite athletes are locked, and multi-million-dollar corporate campaigns are fully activated across every digital network on Earth. It presents itself as the most streamlined, commercially engineered entertainment asset in modern history. But, under the current landscape, as the global continental tournament approaches the absolute brink of kickoff, a devastating structural paradox has exposed the entire operation. This is not a crisis born on the pitch. The football, when it manifests, will undoubtedly be mathematically sublime and historically compelling. The crisis lies entirely within the fragile perimeter surrounding the game. When the absolute sovereign right of a qualified nation to participate in the world's greatest sporting event is no longer decided by athletic merit or sweat on the grass, but is instead dictated by an administrative bureaucrat inside a border security booth, a profound question shatters the corporate narrative. Where does the global empire of FIFA actually reside? For decades, the governing body in Zurich has sold the illusion of absolute transnational authority, operating as a borderless corporate monarchy that stands proudly above the friction of sovereign states. But under present conditions, that illusion has vanished. The machinery of mass entertainment has collided head-on with the cold reality of hard geopolitics, proving that when the infrastructure of a sporting tournament becomes hyper-expanded, Zurich does not gain more global power, it merely multiplies its exposure to systemic risk. When the blueprint for this massive trinational experiment was first unveiled across the major markets of the United States, Mexico, and Canada, the institutional discourse was defined by pure corporate optimism. The narrative was mathematically simple: an unprecedented expansion to 48 national delegations, a staggering schedule of 104 matches, and a 39-day commercial blitz designed to extract maximum liquidity from next-generation stadiums and broadcasting syndicates. It was presented as a frictionless celebration of global unity, a borderless economic engine designed to comfortably generate record-breaking profits. Yet, under the actual panorama of the present day, the backstage reality of this multi-billion-dollar architecture has fractured. Gianni Infantino, faithful to a highly calculated management style, continues to utilize his public appearances to project absolute serenity and central control. The institutional mantra remains unchanged: the assertion that the tournament will be a seamless, uninterrupted festival capable of mystically neutralizing the world's deepest divisions. However, systemic analysis reveals that the organization has consistently confused corporate marketing with real-world operational management. Repeating a beautiful message on a stage does not automatically transform a highly unstable international climate into a safe, predictable environment. Behind the polished press releases, football federations, sovereign security agencies, and corporate stakeholders are locked in intense, anxious disputes over border parameters, political volatility, and an economic backlash that the central planners in Zurich completely failed to forecast. To fully comprehend how quickly corporate control disintegrates when confronted with geopolitical reality, one must analyze the unprecedented dossier of the Iranian national team. Having earned their competitive position legitimately through a brutal qualification campaign concluded in the preceding months, Iran secured its status as a top-tier sporting participant. Their paperwork was in order, their tactical engine was primed. Then, internal political structural shifts occurred. Following the sudden, violent death of Iran's supreme leader, the domestic landscape fractured. Within days, the nation's sports minister appeared on state television to issue a categorical directive that sent shockwaves through the executive offices in Zurich. Under no circumstances would the team participate in a tournament hosted on American soil. It was not a qualified diplomatic stance, it was an absolute institutional refusal. FIFA's reaction was immediate and deeply defensive. During a major executive summit in Vancouver, Infantino took the stage to forcefully project an aura of total compliance, stating flatly that Iran's participation was entirely confirmed and non-negotiable. It was the performance of a corporate executive who had been fighting an invisible, exhausting diplomatic battle behind closed doors and desperately needed to signal stability to his commercial partners. But the Iranian Federation refused to play the role of a passive corporate extra. They responded by issuing a rigid 10-point ultimatum directly to Zurich. They demanded absolute, guaranteed entry visas for every player and staff member, specifically naming elite assets like Mehdi Taremi and Captain Ahsan Hajsafi, whose mandatory national military service histories place them in direct conflict with the highly stringent immigration classification laws of the United States government. They demanded absolute protection at international transport hubs, strict diplomatic respect for their national flag and anthem, and formally requested that FIFA relocate their entire group stage schedule away from American territory and entirely into Mexico. FIFA flatly denied the match relocation, attempting to hold their rigid logistical framework together. For weeks, the team's planned base camp in Tucson, Arizona, became the center of a tense administrative tug-of-war. Then, the system broke completely. The United States government, operating under its own sovereign security mandate, refused to grant the Iranian squad the legal right to stay overnight on American territory. This single sovereign decision instantly exposed the limits of FIFA's global authority. Zurich could not overrule Washington. A highly irregular, unprecedented administrative compromise had to be brokered alongside Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum's administration. The resulting arrangement is a logistical anomaly without parallel in the history of elite sports. Iran will live as a logistical refugee. The squad has abandoned Arizona and established its permanent base camp in Tijuana, Mexico, situated directly against the physical border wall across from San Diego. For the duration of the group stage, the team will exist across two nations simultaneously. They will reside in Mexico, board flights from Tijuana, cross an international border into the United States to play their fixtures at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles and further north in Seattle, and the moment the referee blows the final whistle, they will immediately evacuate American territory and fly back across the border to Mexico. Consider the clinical impact of this architecture on elite human performance. While their opponents rest in highly controlled luxury environments, the Iranian players will navigate international border checkpoints, manage immense jet lag, and execute recovery schedules while caught in the crosshairs of the most complex diplomatic standoff in modern memory. To compound the unprecedented nature of this scenario, the Federation has explored utilizing Iran Air national carriers to move their squad between American match cities, a sovereign transport mechanism completely detached from standard FIFA logistical protocols. Infantino even traveled to a warm-up fixture in Antalya, Turkey, to personally monitor the team's form and hold emergency bilateral meetings with their executives. The image of the FIFA president sitting in a half-empty stadium in Turkey watching an Iranian warm-up match tells you everything you need to know about how terrifying this blind spot is to the financial stability of the Purdiati and F5 NDNEA tournament. As of today, the itinerary is locked, and the team is moving toward Tijuana. They are going, but the fiction of a frictionless global tournament has been permanently shattered. When standard sports media looks at these disruptions, they treat them as isolated incidents, simple administrative errors to be smoothed over by public relations. This is a profound analytical mistake. History demonstrates that international sport has never been a sanctuary separate from the real world. It is, and always has been, a premier theater for the projection of state power, ideological warfare, and strategic image washing. Commentators are already drawing uncomfortable parallels to the cold institutional standoffs of the 1980 Moscow Olympics, raising fundamental questions regarding the threshold at which elite sporting competition becomes completely unviable. The only reason we do not see a cascade of formal country withdrawals under the current landscape is not due to a sudden burst of global harmony, but due to the extraordinarily rigid, punitive nature of FIFA's internal statutes. The governing document of the sport is explicitly engineered to crush any form of politically motivated non-participation. If a national federation chooses to pull out of a tournament, the institutional consequences are catastrophic. Crippling financial penalties, long-term athletic suspensions, and total expulsion from future global competitions. No football association, no matter how profoundly uncomfortable with the political climate of a host country, is willing to pull that financial trigger. They are trapped within a mercantilist framework. Therefore, what we are witnessing under the present panorama is not a standard boycott, but a silent institutional reckoning. It is a forced confrontation with a deeply uncomfortable truth. The line separating football's role as a vehicle for universal harmony and its role as a commercial shield for geopolitical interests has been completely erased. This reckoning is no longer confined to the Middle East. It has spread aggressively across the historical home of football itself. Throughout the European continent, an unprecedented institutional pushback has begun to materialize. The Netherlands initiated the movement with the greatest public velocity. A formal petition gathering over 174,000 verified citizen signatures was officially presented directly to the Dutch parliament, explicitly demanding that the national team refuse to participate in the tournament. The response from the KNVB, the Dutch Football Association, was defined by an almost painful level of institutional caution. The executive leadership stated that the Netherlands would not enact a boycott, but they pointedly added 2 words to their official declaration: so far. Those 2 words did an immense amount of heavy lifting, signaling to Zurich that corporate loyalty was now highly conditional. In Germany, the conversation penetrated the absolute highest echelons of sports governance. An official sitting vice president of the powerful DFB went directly to the public press, stating openly to the Hamburger Morgenpost that the time had come for Europe to seriously evaluate a collective non-participation strategy. This was not a radical external activist or a fringe protester outside a stadium gate. This was a senior executive inside the most economically influential football association on the continent, questioning the moral viability of the entire event. The DFB Executive Council was forced to convene an emergency meeting to release a formal public clarification, affirming their attendance, a move that proved the threat of a European revolt was no longer a hypothetical abstraction. Even the ghosts of FIFA's past have emerged to dismantle the current narrative. Former President Sepp Blatter went public with a blunt, direct warning, stating simply, "Avoid the United States," while throwing his explicit institutional weight behind a growing movement for an absolute fan boycott. This stance was immediately reinforced by senior legal professionals like Mark Piath, a highly respected Swiss anti-corruption lawyer who had previously engineered internal governance reforms for FIFA. In a scathing interview with the Swiss daily Tages-Anzeiger, Piath advised global football supporters to completely stay away from the tournament, citing severe systemic risks and institutional failures that went far beyond mere logistics. Similar structural anxieties rippled through government offices in Spain, while the French Sports Ministry and the Royal Belgian Football Association issued highly calculated statements, trying to keep their focus on athletic preparation while admitting they were keeping a highly anxious eye on escalating international developments. Meanwhile, Denmark found its own territory of Greenland entangled at the absolute center of volatile international security debates, further complicating their relationship with the host infrastructure. Yet, because the financial penalties of withdrawal remain absolute, the federations are going. They will board the planes. They will play the matches. But they do so under a state of profound moral and operational compromise. The strategic planners in Zurich are highly aware of this widespread institutional discomfort, but their historical data tells them they have nothing to fear. They are relying entirely on a well-established precedent, the absolute anesthetic power of the game. One only has to look back at the historical template established during the tournament in Qatar. Prior to that event, the global media landscape was saturated with intense human rights critiques, severe political condemnation, and loud demands for total systemic boycotts. The moral friction was unprecedented. And yet, the precise millisecond, the referee blew the whistle and the ball began to travel across the grass, the collective memory of the global audience was instantly erased. The spectacular goals, the dramatic penalty shootouts, and the fairy tale narratives of elite superstars completely overwhelmed the ethical debate, relegating structural atrocities to a distant media background. FIFA understands that football operates as a massive cultural narcotic. They are fully banking on the expectation that once the first ball is kicked under the current panorama, the sheer weight of mass entertainment will once again blind the public to the structural cracks in their empire. But this calculated corporate optimism faces a dangerous blind spot. The current international environment is vastly more volatile, less predictable, and far more hyper-reactive than anything the sports industry has ever attempted to navigate in its history. The most definitive proof that the current tournament model has reached a dangerous breaking point is not found in political speeches, but in the cold, unyielding metrics of the macroeconomic market. The global fan base is actively executing a silent financial rebellion, punishing the organization for an aggressive ticket pricing strategy that European fan groups have formally designated as a monumental betrayal of the sport's core culture. The data confirms a structural contraction across the entire travel and hospitality ecosystem. Total airline bookings from the European continent to the United States for the primary tournament month have plummeted by a staggering 14% compared to the exact same period in the prior year. This contraction is an economic anomaly. It is occurring in a period where the global value of the US dollar has weakened significantly against the euro, meaning international travel should theoretically be vastly cheaper and highly attractive. The consumer market is making a conscious choice to withdraw. The domestic hospitality infrastructure is feeling the direct impact of this withdrawal. According to a comprehensive data analysis by the American Hotel and Lodging Association, actual room bookings across primary host metropolitan areas are tracking catastrophically below corporate forecasts. In New York City, nearly 62% of hotel operators have formally reported that their tournament-related revenue streams are profoundly softer than expected. Further northwest, the city of Seattle is currently tracking an international visitor volume that is 17% lower than its initial economic projections. The mass tourism boom that local governments were promised to justify millions of dollars in infrastructure spending has simply failed to materialize. This demand deficit has triggered a massive automatic correction inside the secondary ticket market. Between the late April and late May tracking periods, the average resale price for group stage match tickets collapsed by 23%. An astonishing 87 out of 91 combined American and Canadian fixtures have seen their minimum entry prices drop continuously over the past month. The corporate ticket algorithms set the initial prices at a predatory level that real human football fans, navigating real economic conditions, simply refuse to pay. The market is now violently correcting itself week by week toward a lower equilibrium where real demand meets real supply. The public backlash reached such an acute institutional level that multiple congressional representatives were forced to write formal letters, demanding that Zurich make travel and ticketing accessible to normal citizens. In a highly publicized, symbolic gesture, the mayor of New York entered personal negotiations with Infantino to secure a mere 1,000 tickets priced at $50 each for local residents. But let us be clinically precise. In a metropolitan area housing over 8 million citizens, 1,000 discounted tickets is not a structural solution. It is a mathematical rounding error designed to preserve public relations. Infantino has fiercely defended the market rates, pointing to mitigation tools like the FIFA Pass visa prioritization system and specific discounted allocation tiers for domestic fan associations. But no amount of corporate public relations can cover up the underlying systemic reality. The sheer gigantism of the format has hyperinflated the cost of participation past the point of structural sustainability. When you strip away the layers of corporate marketing, geopolitical standoff, and macroeconomic volatility, you are left with a profoundly compelling sporting landscape. On pure footballing terms, the field of competition assembled under the current panorama is one of the most mathematically intense collections of talent ever seen. We are standing before the absolute twilight of an era. France arrives at the absolute peak of their global power, with Kylian Mbappé sitting mere goals away from shattering Miroslav Klose's all-time tournament scoring record, while Didier Deschamps prepares his tactical engine for what is widely understood to be his definitive farewell campaign. Argentina steps onto the grass as the defending champions, with Lionel Messi at the absolute end of his historic career, managing a highly sensitive physical injury concern that his federation has kept under total informational lockdown. Brazil introduces a new tactical epoch under Carlo Ancelotti, featuring Vinicius Jr. at the height of his powers alongside Neymar, making what is functionally his final attempt to capture the one trophy his generation has failed to secure. Spain enters as the reigning champions of Europe, presenting a young, fluid, geometrically perfect tactical system that is nearly impossible to disrupt. England carries a squad of frightening structural depth, bearing the psychological weight of multiple decades without an international title onto the pitch for every single match. Norway breaks an agonizing multi-decade absence from the world stage, powered by an Erling Haaland who completely demolished the qualification phase with 16 goals in 8 matches, desperate to leave his definitive mark on his very first tournament. And Morocco returns to the arena, no longer as a surprising underdog, but as an established footballing power with everything to prove. 48 nations, 104 matches, 16 cities, and 3 vast countries. Historic footballing cauldrons, like Mexico City and Guadalajara, alongside modern arenas in Toronto and Vancouver, are entirely prepared to unleash an emotional atmosphere that will remind every human being on the planet why this game possesses an unmatched hold over the human psyche. The systemic resistance to this tournament is real, documented, and historically unprecedented. The image of the Iranian national team executing a continuous cross-border flight schedule from Tijuana just to fulfill a group stage fixture will be analyzed by sports historians for a century. The spectacle of the Dutch parliament formally debating whether their athletes should cross the Atlantic will become a case study in modern diplomacy. The structural reality of the $150 train fare, the $6,900 supporter package, and the $38,000 final ticket will be dissected in corporate review processes long after the dust has settled. But within a matter of days, an absolute and inevitable transition will occur. A referee standing on the grass of the Estadio Azteca, the sacred ground where Pelé lifted the trophy and Diego Maradona scored the goal of the century, will raise a whistle to his lips, the sound of over 87,000 human voices who have waited their entire lives for that precise instant will fill the air. The ball will move, and football, when it finally starts, has a brutal, beautiful way of making everything else wait. I demand your clinical, tactical, and geopolitical verdict in the comments section below immediately. 1. Has FIFA committed a fatal strategic design error by hyperinflating the tournament to 48 teams, mathematically multiplying the points of diplomatic friction and corporate vulnerability in an increasingly unstable international environment? 2. Does the governing body possess any real operational authority left? Or has this cycle permanently proven that the national security mandates and border control laws of sovereign states completely overrule the dictates of Zurich? 3. If the beauty of the game completely buries the political and economic noise the moment the ball moves, does that mean football is truly immune to the crises of the real world? Or does it simply confirm that it remains the most effective, terrifying tool of soft power ever engineered by human history? Deconstruct these raw institutional realities in the comments section below. Engage the like mechanism if this investigation successfully unmasked the structural depth fracturing the mainstream sports narrative, and subscribe immediately. We will track the tactical adjustments, the transition metrics, and the systemic geopolitical fallout from the opening kickoff at the Estadio Azteca to the final ledger at MetLife Stadium. The data does not lie, the blueprint is executed, and the clock is ticking. Thank you for analyzing with us, and I will see you in the next investigation.